Hey, folks. How are you guys this evening, or maybe a different day if you're watching this a different day? Welcome to the weekly live stream, Neurofeedback and Chill. Tonight we're going to talk about daylight saving time. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, that's kind of weird. I'm going to put up my book on the screen because I'm trying to plug this book. You guys can go. You guys can go do a pre-order for this. Not a pre-order. You can register your interest in this if you follow the link in the description, giftedandtortured.com, and I will send you an email in the next week or so when it's released. I'm still finishing up the final edits, and then I'll send it off to the printer. So I should have it in my hands 1 to 2 weeks to start sending it out, and at that same point, it'll be available on Amazon. So let me know if you guys can hear me, please. As usual, I never quite trust the streaming tech stack I'm using. But tonight I wanted to talk about the circadian rhythm. So it is Monday, March 2nd here, 2026. If you're watching this in the fall because you came across a daylight saving time keyword, some of this will also apply. I want to go through all of the sort of biology, some of the perspective we have in terms of health effects, and then some of the things we can do to minimize our risk or improve our circadian health with regards to some of these increased stressors we might experience with daylight saving time. So, what is this thing? Well, every spring we run an experiment, the same experiment. We take over 300 million people in the US, some of this in Europe as well. We steal an hour of their sleep, shift their clocks relative to the sun, and just watch what happens. So what happens? Well, heart attacks go up, fatal car crashes go up, workplace injuries go up, stroke admissions spike for about 48 hours, and then we do it again in the fall. And nobody in our leadership or Congress or government seems to think this is weird or something worth paying attention to. Essentially, daylight saving time is a forced circadian experiment on millions of brains. And tonight I want to show you exactly what it does biologically, walk you through some of the data on acute harms with specific studies, and then give you a protocol for getting back on track that's grounded in actual phase shifting biology. So if we haven't met yet, I'm Dr. Andrew Hill, founder of Peak Brain Institute, co-founder of True Brain, author of a new book coming out in a couple of weeks that talks about atypical phenotypes and how those produce some of the gifted and tortured experiences we have. So if you want to get on that list, sign up for the book release, and I will send you an email. So let's back up, though. Let's talk about the circadian rhythm. What is the circadian rhythm? How does the brain know about time? There's actually several different timing mechanisms within the brain and body, and to some extent they are synchronized, kind of like various clocks that have timing cascading down throughout the brain and body. And the primary time key, or the primary oscillator that is entrained or that has sensitivity to the environment is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN. The SCN sits above the optic chiasm, or the Greek letter chi, or X. So above the optic chiasm, we have the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And the SCN has a primary job of sort of sensing the color of light as it hits the retina in the morning. It's very sensitive to a specific flavor or color that's in the air. And it's most sensitive from a little bit before sunrise to maybe half an hour or so after sunrise. And so the circadian rhythm hears this primary signal from the SCN, almost like a bell going off, and other systems cascade down and synchronize as a result. So it's kind of a weak signal, and it works best when it's heard repetitively, and then we entrain a little bit. Essentially, the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, allows our circadian rhythm to serve as a bridge to keep pulling us back into range. So the Earth's photoperiod, the daylight cycle, is about 24 hours. And our circadian rhythm is not. It's just a bit longer than that usually. And so what that allows us to do is to continuously synchronize our circadian rhythm or our wake sleep activity cycle back with the Earth's photoperiod. And that means that we can be sensitive enough to handle shifting seasons and different, even flexible lifestyles. We can go into night shift, or we can be, day hunters, night hunters, crepuscular hunters as humans. Humans are really, just as an aside, we're a really cool creature in terms of development, in that we seem to have stopped about halfway into the developmental trajectories. If you look at other creatures, they all have more specialized tools for working with their environment, and they go through more of a developmental trajectory as they go into maturation. And if you look at how we stack up on that, we don't develop the horns and claws and thicker layers of tissue that other animals do, and we seem to stop in some ways more in the intermediate steps, and we also require way more care in the early steps than most animals do. So we're biased for that cognitive stuff, apparently, instead of the physical. Instead of developing more fully into the environment, we're optimized, we're biased, we're evolved to specialize partially, and then through our intelligence and our tool use and our symbol manipulation, force the environment to cooperate with us and force the environment to develop more and adapt to us at that point. So, we're kind of a weird creature developmentally, but the circadian stuff is super basic, and almost any organism will have some degree of circadian entrainment. Even bacteria will do oscillatory stuff through looking at cycles of metabolic byproducts trading off throughout time, and one of those might be sensitive to sunlight or sensitive to temperature that is sensitive to light. And so you can do this circadian tracking thing even in single cell organisms, but we as multi-cell communities end up doing a pretty sophisticated series of circadian tracking. All right, let me stop and say hello and answer questions. I see Radar Ashwood here asking questions. Hey, Radar, nice to see you, man. You can hear and see. Thank you for the confirmation. Neurofeedback to increase endorphins. I think that you don't want to boost endorphins with neurofeedback itself. I think what you really would want to do is increase sensitivity in the endogenous opioid system in general. And we know that SMR training does some of that. I would think that other GABAergic training like alpha theta would also do that. So what I would say is, Radar, a couple ideas for you if you're trying to boost your feeling depth, your pleasure depth, your rush depth with neurofeedback is one, fast from the appetitive stimuli for a little while. Two, do combinations of alpha theta and SMR. And my hunch is you will create strong plasticity shifts, much more sensitivity, and have a more rich hedonic tone that is more easily brought up into higher heights of experience. But you have to do that by increasing plasticity of the system and its baseline tone, not boosting the system. Another opportunity that is not neurofeedback, but you may want to actually go for a walk in the forest. Literally taking walks in the woods have pretty significant changes in plasticity. And there's a bunch of reasons: eye gaze reasons, gait reasons, color reasons, air reasons, breathing reasons. But go for a walk in the woods. Japanese forest bathing is an ancient tradition. And see what you think of that, doing some of that for some endorphin support. All right, so I mentioned what the circadian rhythm is. You have this master clock that kind of synchronizes all the other clocks throughout the body and brain, the SCN. And it's really the conductor, not the only time keeper. So it's not the one that makes you sort of wake up and feel drowsy. That's really the hormonal systems that will sloppily entrain to that. And so that is true of your hunger, your eating, and many of these systems are bidirectional. In fact, one of the stronger exogenous cues, or cues from the outside, that helps you entrain to the outside world is not light as much as it is when you eat. It's at least as competing in strength. So one really important rule that I'll get into later that you want to think about is eat in the time zone you want to live in. That's a much better way to stay entrained. And you can use that even when doing things like staying up late for studying or partying or working. If you don't want to do that all the time, then don't eat when you're studying up late at night, or at least don't eat very much. So there's a bunch of reasons for that, but I'll get into those a little bit later on. A little teaser to hold you to the end of the video. YouTube style, stay till things you wish you knew, and only you will know. You'll have the secrets. You'll have the mysteries. Stick around. So as the SCN is the conductor, the baton is really light. The light is and the darkness timing are being used to sort of release vasopressin, one of the neurohormones, right up there with oxytocin in terms of how it informs basic driven behavior. All the neurohormones act sort of as peptides and as hormones, and vasopressin is no different. In the body, actually, vasopressin acts as the anti-diuretic hormone. It's the thing that helps the kidneys not pull too much water out of the bloodstream. And ADH in the body and vasopressin in the brain are related. They're related to, there's some nootropic components here. I know you guys are all biohackers, so there's an old nootropic trick that salespeople would use. They would use vasopressin meltaways, little oral ones that were used for bedwetting, but they would use them before going into sales meetings, and they would create a cognitive boost briefly. You can also use desmopressin inhalers. Those are used for bedwetting as well as for hemophilia. There's a clotting cascade effect. So if you do hack around with vasopressin, be a little careful, because there are some clotting interactions as well. So that's a thing to keep in mind. The circadian rhythm is driven by vasopressin, but then secondary systems and hormones, insulin, cortisol, etc., they also have oscillatory patterns. And you need these oscillatory patterns in cortisol, in blood sugar, in body temperature. In fact, body temperature oscillates by over a full degree for most of us, Fahrenheit, every single day. And it's not because the body can't hold at a temperature. It's because that oscillatory rhythm likely has some significance for supporting timing. So the question here, let me stop and answer those. Radar is asking or is telling us, I've heard some practitioners say that you should rarely directly train down low to mid beta. Okay. My understanding is you do this regularly. I do this regularly. Yeah. Why do you have a different view from other clinicians on this? Well, what I would encourage you to think about, Radar, is where. Clinicians probably don't unilaterally say don't touch beta. They probably say don't touch it in certain places if you actually asked. I train a lot of different sites. So for instance, FZ minus PZ or PZ minus A1, those can have excessive failure mode betas in the 12 to 20 hertz range. And so you may want to inhibit beta if a tissue is experiencing a failure mode or a cramp mode, those tissues can experience. I did a live stream which talks about, I think, sequencing of neurofeedback protocols, and I also talked a lot about bipolar versus monopolar, if you will, channels in there. No such thing as monopolar TLDR. It's all bipolar just based on where you reference. But you think about different tissues having certain modes of activity. It's usually beta, and usually the failure modes of tissues are more in the slow modes of thetas and alphas becoming excessive, so disinhibition or idling. Or you think about the very fast betas up in the beta spindle ranges, 18 to 23, or faster, up in the 20s, or even faster. So these are often the place it makes more sense to manipulate, if you will, or shape with neurofeedback. But then you can think about tissues like the cingulates, and one of their failure modes is generating too much 15 to 18 hertz, or even too much 12 to 15 hertz. So you might not want to reference FZ back to CZ and inhibit 12 to 15, because now you're effectively doing SMR inhibition. And then that statement you made about not touching low beta makes sense. But if you did FZ minus PZ, even FZ minus A1, you'd be able to manipulate more safely the beta. And again, if it makes sense for those tissues, and the only way you know is if you look at the person's QEEG. The tissues have certain things they do across people, but you have to match this to the individual. If you have beta spindles in the 18 to 23 hertz range, and you're instead inhibiting 12 to 20, you might get some effect, but you might also feel dull. But if you target it where you need the inhibition, better inhibition. And by looking at the shapes of the data, the shapes of what's happening at the frequency level, the band level, and the single hertz wide bins level. The bin is often what we call the single hertz wide band. So in the bin level, you can often tell where the spindle is in the power distortions in absolute and raw. You really should look at the raw at the raw data. So absolute and relative. Look at the raw data, find the spindle, and then go to those sites on the head. That montage, you can see it in the raw, and try to figure out what frequency it's in. So you can learn to recognize the frequency showing up in both amplitude bursts, relative power distortions, and raw signal. It's a really easy way to spot the frequency of a spindle, is to get used to looking at it in both places. And once you can do that, you'll know if it's persistent 23 hertz, then maybe you inhibit 20 to 32 and you don't worry about it. But if it's little bursting frisson moments of 18 to 23, then you may have to do a narrow inhibit and do a down training there in addition to your top band. So think about the individual tissues and then look at the individual person, and that will help you know if it's appropriate. You're right, though. It could be problematic to do as a rule, but where and for whom is really important part of the process, you might agree. Hope that was answering your questions, Radar. This is the Sonia has joined us. Hello, Sonia. Nice to see you tonight. We've been talking about the circadian rhythm. Let's get back to that. The suprachiasmatic nucleus that sits above the optic chiasm and catches the color of light first thing in the morning. So given all this, given that we have these tissues to entrain, then what does daylight saving do? What does springing forward an hour actually do? I gave you horror stories about how we have these increases of health crises, but what's actually happening? Well, when you spring forward, you lose an hour, right? It's suddenly an hour later than it was a moment ago. You wake up and your body thinks it's an hour earlier, but the problem with that is the light has not precessed that hour. So your mornings are darker than they were before the time shift. You're waking up before the sun, and this is moving time for you effectively. And so you're waking up before the sun was where it was yesterday at your old wake time, and your evenings are now brighter. There's more light later in the day. Now, this combination, think about it, less morning light for reduced entrainment, more evening light for pushing the entrainment the day back in the day. This is the wrong direction for adjusting forward, for springing ahead. Morning light advances your clock. Evening light delays your clock. So spring daylight saving hits you with a phase advance demand right while it's simultaneously giving you light signals that push you in the opposite direction. This is why circadian scientists describe spring DST as functionally equivalent to a sort of short eastbound flight by a couple of hours. If you've ever gone from, Arizona to the East Coast, you kind of feel it, a couple hours, feels kind of weird, feels kind of icky. That's what everyone experiences all at once, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, and this isn't just feeling tired. This is an acute sleep loss combined with circadian sort of misalignment. And it tips the nervous system towards a few things: sympathetic dominance, more flight or fight, less parasympathetic recovery. This also increases inflammatory signaling, impairs attention, reaction time, and executive function. In a population that's already loaded with cardiovascular risk, metabolic disease, sleep debt, you're adding a nudge in exactly the wrong direction by this stuff. So what do we see on the data? There's really two things. There's the acute harms in the classic literature, and then there's a bunch of mixed signals that I want to draw your attention to, because it's not quite as simple as it only is a horrible thing and every study shows that. I want to be honest with you here. So let's walk through the data. First of all, we had a heart attack baseline finding out of a Swedish registry study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. This compared heart attack incidents in the first week after the daylight saving shift, and matched weekdays in surrounding weeks. And the week after the spring shift showed an incident ratio of 1.05, 5% increase of heart attack. Small, but significant. And it was really in the first 3 weekdays after daylight saving, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, typically. So there was another Michigan statewide PCI registry that's a percutaneous let's see, cardiovascular coronary intervention. It's when they put a catheter in and have to basically bring you to a cath lab. So essentially, this is confirmation you had a myocardial infarction if they've sent you to a cath lab for intervention, generally. So people actually had a heart attack. They found for these people, total weekly volume of heart attacks at the cath lab didn't change, but the timing did. It got compressed into the Monday after spring DST. 24% increase for Monday compared to other weeks. The Tuesday after the fallback, 21 in the fall, 21% decrease. So it seems like it's rocking the risk for people a little bit. Maybe pulling people a bit forward, the risk forward in time by adding stress, essentially. So if you look at a meta-analysis, looked at these studies and a few others, about 7 total. I think there was a total of 115,000 people. There was an overall transition AMI, acute myocardial infarction ratio of 1.05. So pretty big increase. Now, that being said, let's be honest, there is some data that shows something different. A 2025 study in JAMA by Egan and colleagues looked at 168,000 people, similar size. And these were heart attack patients across 1,100 U.S. hospitals across about 10 years. And they found no difference in myocardial infarctions based on week ranges. Now, there's a flaw in that I'll get into in a moment. But it didn't find any per week level change compared to surrounding weeks. A large English study found something similar, looked in the British Medical Journal the same year, Jack and colleagues, 12 years of data, found small reductions in cardiovascular events in the fall. Okay. So how do you square that with earlier interventions? A couple things. The early studies focused on a very narrow window. They often found the effect happening in 2 days or 3 days, or even 1 day. The first Monday, the first 3 days, etc. So these transient timing shifts of risk, of acute effect, will move through a single day or 2 days much more visibly in the signal of the data than will a bump on a 1 or 2 days that it washes out over a week. So I think that's what's happening with the earlier the more recent studies. They look at weeks or even a couple of weeks and don't see huge effects. I think that's what's happening. So it's also 3% to 5% even when you zoom in on a few days of time window. And so, there's a very small signal there. While real, it's a small enough one to be washed out. So there was one study by the Michigan group that argued for this. They said that the daylight savings time may redistribute the events. So, it exists, but it's not a clean signal. Other related studies on different things. There was a Finnish study on stroke. Ischemic stroke after daylight savings time in the spring was 8% higher in the spring. In the fall, no difference. So it seems like it's a significant impact. And it's 48 hours is when the risk is increased. And the increased risk was gone after the first 2 days. This is interesting because any mild stroke, transient ischemic attack kind of stuff that we see, if you have a TIA and then you generally recover very quickly and don't have another one for 2 days, your risk of stroke goes down. But if you do have another one within 2 days, then you're sort of in the danger zone. And this shows the same thing. There's a 2 day window of increased risk after daylight saving in the spring. So after that, you seem to be able to adjust to it. Now, there was another study or another series of studies on fatal car crashes. And the signal here in the data is really strong. And it's a large data set, pretty robust. There was a U.S. data set looking at drivers through 1996 through 2017, over 732,000 fatal motor vehicle accidents. The spring transition increased fatal crash risk by 6%. And the effect was a morning pronunciation of the effect. So people are clearly not on their game the morning after daylight saving time specifically. Monday morning next week, if you're watching this live, be careful if you're in the US. Maybe go to work late or work from home the first half of the day. So here's the effect I found most compelling in that study. The effect was stronger the locations further west within the time zone. So if you live in the western edge of your time zone, your social time is already drifting away from solar time. The spring DST makes that gap bigger for you if you're on that western edge of your time zone. There's also an older US paper showing a small increase in fatal accidents on the Monday after the spring shift. And these effects did not show an effect in non-fatal. So, severity seems to matter here. We also looked at a Finnish study, came across a Finnish study that looked at traffic accidents and didn't find an increase. So apparently people in Finland don't have the same traffic incidents. Now there's fewer people there. It's a smaller country. Maybe they're used to driving in the wintertime differently than most of the U.S. is, who only a small portion of the U.S. experiences this. I'd wonder about people in like Maine and Massachusetts who tend to have to drive in those winter times. But we didn't cherry pick, and so we did see this Finnish study not showing the same incidence as the U.S. broad studies, which were not only very robust but time zone positional dependent. So we also look at workplace injuries, and we see those went way up in a few different studies. There was one on mining industries. U.S. mining industry showed a report looking after spring DST. Workers slept 40 minutes less by self-report and had 5.7% increase workplace injuries that day. And the injuries were also more severe, more lost work time because of those injuries. So attention, vigilance, error monitoring, there's your frontal lobe. So there is a measurable change that seems to happen with this that is significant. A few more studies that seem to show up, or a few more signals at least, that tell us something's happening. Missed medical appointments increase in the spring week and reverse in the fall week after the change. So even healthcare logistics wobble with our policy, basically. So as a broad computational analysis across multiple data sets, you can look at a couple of studies showing risk clusters elevating in a few different places. Cardiovascular disease, injuries, mental and behavioral stuff, immune diseases, all these increases are a few percent, but at a population level of a few 100 million people, a few percentage of people having acute shifts means tens or even hundreds of thousands of people being affected by this stuff. So pretty big impacts culturally and sociopolitically. So, why does 1 hour matter? Well, there's 4 different pathways that may impact here. Radar is opining, I hate daylight savings. Who here hates daylight saving? Get into the comments. Tell me if you're not a big fan of DST. And if you don't like daylight saving, do you care more about the spring or the fall, or do you hate them equally? Or maybe you love them. Let me know. And let me know your time zone or roughly where in the world you are, so I know if it matters. There are some states in the U.S. that don't observe DST. It's kind of lock it, and I think those people have reduced incidences of all these things. But much of the U.S. and a lot of Europe goes through this. I think UK does too. So there's 4 different reasons or 4 different pathways these things take in terms of creating the impact. One is the obvious one I've mentioned, sleep loss, circadian entrainment issues. The second one is inflammatory signaling. Morris and colleagues at Harvard ran a study looking at a forced desynchrony protocol. It was published in PNAS, and they found that the circadian misalignment alone, and independent of sleep duration, increases the 24-hour interleukin-6 by between 15 and 29%, and also elevates CRP, TNF alpha, and resistin. These aren't exotic biomarkers. These are the same ones your doctor looks for, looking for heart disease and other inflammatory factors and metabolic risk. Daylight savings time is a population scale circadian misalignment experiment, and the inflammation is this bridge between I'm tired and my biology is stressed. And that's what we're doing at a huge, massive population level. All right, that third pathway, cognitive impairment. If you are literally making worse decisions, worse reaction time, worse working memory, reduced inhibition, slowed processing, etc., more emotional reactivity, then you're going to get more car accidents and have more secondary problems. There was a study in 2023 by Van Dongen showed that restricting sleep to 6 hours a night for 2 weeks produces vigilance lapses equivalent to a full night of total sleep loss. And so you're basically creating some movement in the brain's ability to flex in that direction. Fourth pathway, of course, light timing. This is the hidden one, but Ravel and colleagues showed that morning bright light can advance circadian phase by 1.7 to 2.4 hours over 3 days. Strong light in the morning, 3 days, over 2 hours of movement in the circadian precess. That's amazing, right? That's way more than you might need to handle. It also gives you some interventions that might work. And so we should think about this human phase response curve, right? Like what does that look like? Well, Chang, Shear, and Seisler, map the human phase response curve and confirm that light in the biological evening and early night processes produce reliable phase delays. Spring DST steals this phenomena, steals morning light, extends evening light. So your biology is trying to adjust forward while the light is pushing you back. This mismatch slows the adaptation and extends the vulnerability window from maybe 1 day to a few days in terms of risk factors from the light impacts. So what can you do? Well, you can develop your own phase reset protocol, your phase advance protocol that I'll tell you all about as soon as I answer a few more questions. Radar's letting us know we were supposed to get rid of DST in California years ago, but the state legislation can't commit to what time zone they want to make permanent. Yeah, I believe at the federal level, we have passed in Congress once or twice the whatever the statute is to make a permanent daylight savings time countrywide. And once that's taken up, it still has to be ratified by the states, right? It's a resolution. Or an amendment, I guess, to the Constitution. And people seem mostly for it, but it looks like the prevailing science and the prevailing politics are leaning towards a permanent daylight saving time, not a true noon. There's the Society for the True Noon, which is sort of a tongue-in-cheek. They sort of remind me of a slightly more scientifically grounded, Church of the Subgenius. But there's the Society for the True Noon that are fighting back against daylight saving time various places throughout the world. But I think there is this political movement. It has been passed, but it may take years to get through the state levels before it finally gets put into place, is my guess in the U.S. But for the next few years anyways, these biohacks might help you take some control. Rado's also telling us, I only realized within the last year that time zones are political and are only loosely correlated with what the sun is doing. They are a little bit arbitrary, yeah. I can see more folks joining us. Hello, more folks. Thanks for wandering in. We're talking about circadian biology, and where you've reached the point of the show where we're going to talk about what you can do, how you can optimize your own circadian rhythm. And we have about a week before daylight saving time kicks in this time, so plenty of advance notice in case you want to try some of these things. All right, so here's what you can do. Think of this as your phase advance. You're in a phase, a circadian phase or circadian entrainment, and you're trying to advance your phase in advance or before the clock suddenly flips on you so that you slide into that well primed for that information. Ideally, start 3 to 4 days before Sunday. So start on Wednesday or Thursday and shift your bedtime and wake time each day by between 15 minutes and 30 minutes. 15 or 20 will do it if you're doing 4 days. So take, 20 minutes and start on Sunday or Saturday night and do Saturday night, Friday night, Thursday night, maybe Wednesday night, and go back 15, 20 minutes every night. And start going to bed early right now. Shift your wake time to match. Same amount. Also, make sure you're getting the cortisol and blood sugar sort of response to the environment signals dialed in properly. So start fasting 2 hours before that new planned bedtime and advance the fast a little time as you go. In the morning when you get up before caffeine, you want to burn off the blood sugar and the cortisol that woke you up as a clearance signal for starting a different phase of the circadian rhythm before calling for more cortisol and more blood sugar through huge activity or becoming a slug on the couch or eating. So fast in the morning for at least a few minutes while you gently exercise, move, walk around, do some yoga, that kind of thing. So fast before bed, get up early, go for a walk. But in this case, shift by 15 or 20 minutes a day and count backwards from Saturday night. And remember the day after the shift, so in this case, Sunday morning, Monday morning, depending, that's the highest risk day. So that morning, becomes a little more important to get the morning entrainment. So I do think food timing is the biggest around the clock signal that you have control over that will drag you back, so to speak, in time. But the strong one, the button to push, is the morning light. And that one becomes super important the morning after it changes. So that morning, get up, open the windows, go outside, get some light in your face, maybe get some ambient light through a window at least. And if you get up really early before sunrise, or you're in a place where it's really dark this time of day, there are places in the world like that in the northern latitudes, put some light on your face, desk lamp, bright lights overhead. The intensity of light seems to be what matters for circadian rhythm, not so much the color. We're really only sensitive to the color really first thing in the morning, but the intensity in general will create some impacts. So this is also why you don't need to worry too much about evening light that's not blue or red or whatever. Those blue blockers are pretty irrelevant, actually. Instead, if you're trying to hack light in the evening, the things become intensity. So overhead lights, position of light can matter, and intensity. So turn down lights to half dimness, put your TV on night mode, put your screens on night mode, turn the overhead lights off and put the desk lamps on. And that's your classic evening light hack, honestly, is to let the system settle in that way. And then just to reinforce the idea of fasting, the reason for it, melatonin release, when you're naturally entrained, you get a melatonin signal that rises at that point. Among other things, it shuts off the pancreas. Blood sugar falls off a cliff, insulin falls off a cliff, and that's a signal that if you wish, if there's food around, well, you can store it, you can snack, and I think evolutionarily that makes sense. You know, if there's resources and you're going to go to bed, maybe you should eat it before the caveman next door does, but not so ideal when there's a 7-Eleven or a refrigerator or a DoorDash. So resist eating, let your blood sugar drop a little bit, let the clearance happen for cortisol. And then after you fall asleep, instead of suppressing growth hormone and waking up fat and tired, you will have a much larger pulse of growth hormone, especially if you're below 35, and you'll wake up lean and with more energy and having rested more deeply, having sucked down into deeper, more restorative, more healing sleep. Before I give you the last hack or two, let's see, a couple more questions. Radar's asking, how are the Neurobit Optima amps? I have one right here. Little show and tell. Here's Neurobit Optimal. This is a 2-channel. The 4 channels are also good. They're pretty good. Here's the aux channel. This is the 4-channel plus. What a plus means on a Neurobit is it has the auxiliary input, and that's important for me for HEG. There's an adapter you can use with the Karman HEGs to make them fit in this, and that works great. And the 2-channel amps are pretty good. The 4 channels are even better, more channels. I'm kidding, actually. When doing neurofeedback, generally 1 and 2 channels is the way to go. And there's a gap in utility to some extent between about 4 and about 19. And even the use of 4 is kind of limited. There's only very particular circumstances, and for very particular goals and people, you might want to do 4-channel training. You can do almost all you need to do with a single channel, and you can certainly do things with 2 channels in the vast majority of classic neurofeedback and even more advanced neurofeedback. So good amps. They're not quite as, here's a Pocket Neurobics Whiz amp that's actually plugged in right now. I'm using it. If you notice, they're about the same size, but the Pocket Neurobics is wrapped in rubber or silicone or something. And because of that, it's a little bit more isolated from mechanical noise. So if you have one of these on a desk and a truck goes by, your EEG will vibrate a little bit, or if you put your arm on the desk, it'll bounce the EEG a bit more. The mechanical isolation is not as good. I've tried a few things. One thing I do, you see how these little feet on the bottom, but I sometimes take those little elastic wristbands that you can put around cups or wrists or whatever, or a cup cooler, and you can slide it over these things, and then it will keep it actually elevated from a mechanical surface like your desk, and that helps a huge amount actually for improving signal quality. A couple little rubber bands or something, thick, high rubber bands to lift it off of a desk. But no, the quality of the signals are very good. And the amps are relatively affordable. They're kind of expensive. I mean, this is all niche hardware. So I forget what these things cost retail right now. I think the 2 channels are around $750 and the 4 channels is around $1,000, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me. If you want one, we'll buy one for you though. You just let us know. We'll figure out what the actual prices for you at that time. But these are one of the amps we use. I would say of the 150 kits we have out there, we probably have about 100 of these. Well, maybe half and half between Pocket Neurobics Whiz amps and these. And in a few of my offices, we also have some of the Thought Technology amps in use as well. But those take extra wires. Every channel takes a ground, so you have to have 6 wires instead of 5. So those are a bit more unwieldy. And they have a secondary preamp, so we don't send those out as often. This is the Sonia's asking, by processing speed, do I mean solely alpha wave activity? Are there other factors contributing to speed of processing? I'm not sure if I've asked. If yes, sorry about that. No worries. I mean, even if you have asked, if you don't know, it means I haven't been all that memorable. No, you haven't asked, I don't think. Yes, processing speed is the metric in the EEG where we can see, or rather alpha is where we can see processing speed. It does proxy to it. But it's really what you're looking at with alpha is the speed of the idle, not the speed of the processing. And what you can do is look at the synchronization or similarity within the hemisphere of the alpha, and that will tell you how well that hemisphere can lift off circuits out of neutral together or synchronize their beta when they go into gear. And then you can look at the beta waves and see how fast those are, which is truly the low beta is truly where some of the speed of processing would be. But you can infer it more reliably from the raw alpha speed at idle, because that's when things are turned off before you kick it into gear. It's harder to tell, what it means once it's in gear, but you can tell where it is when it's in idle. And the synchrony tells you how well you can kick it into gear. So you can trust alpha more as a measurement of someone's processing speed if their alpha is synchronous or similar within the hemisphere. Typically left hemisphere is what you use. And if the alpha is spreading out and slowing down within the hemisphere, you can often use the fastest alpha as the native speed that they will normalize around when they feel rested. Just be careful, because sometimes outliers in a speed table or a peak frequency table will be because of artifact or noise, and it's important to know how to discard an outlier when that's the case. And that requires looking at raw data as well as the numeric as calculated. So I hope that answered your question. It's various things. And then experientially, Sonia, it's word finding, it's speed of inspection time, speed of thought, speed of reading, ability to hold things in your mind at once. It's that kind of combination of working memory and speed and raw speed, I think. Yeah. Hey, Joe Barr, nice to see you. Joined late. Not sure if this came up. Does the switch to daylight saving or daylight standard have an opposite effect, less fatal accidents, etc.? Great question. I did go over it a little bit, but the short answer is it's a very strong but small effect for making things worse in the spring. And most of the studies saw no effect of making things better in the fall. 1 or 2 saw a little bit of improvement in the fall, and 1 showed just less worsening in the fall, but still worser. So there's still something in the fall where it does seem to rock back. For instance, doctor visits drop off for a couple of weeks right after DST. And then when it ends in the fall, they resume their incidence rate or come back. So there is some stuff there, but generally both are stressful. And the amount of recovery, reduction in incidence of heart attacks and things does not offset the increase of heart attacks we see in the spring. So on net, it appears to be a pretty big downside, unfortunately. So back to your personal phase reset protocols. I talked about starting 3 to 4 days before and shifting your onset of sleep, your wake time, and your food all back 20 minutes a day, 15 if you're doing 4 days. The day after the shift, morning light becomes critical. Get out there in the light in the morning for 30 minutes if you can, or open your shades, or be in a light, bright house if you can. If you're in a dark time zone, turn on lots of overhead lights and live very bright for those first 30 minutes. Second, move your body early. Burn off that blood sugar. Teach your body about the new morning time. I've already mentioned that a little bit. Third, caffeine's earlier, but not more. So if you're noticing that with the time zone shift, you have your coffee or whatever relative to whenever you get up, half an hour after you get up, an hour after you get up is actually really good. But then you notice you're tired in the afternoon. Don't use that as an opportunity to have later in the day coffee than you normally would. Still cut it off before noon, and don't stretch it just because you're a little bit wiped if you are. And if you are a little bit wiped, you are sleep deprived, treat some of the behavior you're experiencing like a risky activity. Driving becomes more high risk. That fatal crash signature is real in the data, and it's something I would really suggest we pay attention to at a high level. That's risk you can modify. Modifiable behaviors. Wearing a seatbelt is one. Going in an hour later on Monday after daylight savings time might be one, or at least making sure you go to bed early and are aware that the Monday morning after daylight savings starts up is kind of like driving around on a Thursday or Friday evening on a holiday weekend where everyone's a little bit drunk and tired and on their worst behavior. Because that appears to be what's happening. Some of the increases are pretty big. 5% with some of the smaller ones, 28% for some of the bigger ones. So there's some big impact here. And then evening, the last part of your sleep hacking strategy for phase advancement is don't sabotage yourself by just staying up late that Monday night, that Tuesday night. Lean into the continued shift for 3 to 4 days afterwards and make sure you're continuing to sleep at an appropriate time. And remember, morning wake time is the critical circadian entrainment window, more important than the evening. So lock in the morning one is non-negotiable, minimal viable practice, but then try to lean into a few nights after the shift of going to bed a little bit earlier, or at least early enough. Now fall back, this gives you an extra hour, which is sort of a different problem. People usually go to bed too late anyways, and so what you don't want to do is sort of double down on the sabotaging yourself by leaning into that, by thinking you have more slop than you really do, and then you end up being slammed by the other problem in the morning in some ways. You end up being dysregulated, and you still have some reaction time and some cardiovascular risk factors. So the bottom line, lock your wake time, push morning light, pull back evening light, keep the cues consistent for several days, and your circadian system will thank you. It'll sync up within a few days. You just have to give it the right signals. And again, we talked a little bit about the policy here. I think as this stuff starts to get sorted out, we will see reduction in fatal car crashes and heart attacks after the spring. This is the Sunshine Protection Act that you were talking about, Radar. It keeps coming up. So, talk to your congressperson if you care about this. I think it's passed, but not been fully ratified. So daylight saving sounds appealing, but I think it's for saving political stuff, not truly your health. So, in summary, DST is a forced semi-annual circadian experiment that you are being forced to participate in with no informed consent on millions of brains. The clock moves instantly, your brain does not. So the solution here is not willpower, it's light timing, it's ramping up into that time zone change, ramping down out of it, depending what time of year. Take control of your brain. And if you want your brain assessed, find a Peak Brain. peakbraininstitute.com has offices in Los Angeles, St. Louis, Orange County, California, Palm Beach, Florida, London, Stockholm, all over the place. You can also do fully remote work with us throughout the US, also other countries. And I have a deal for you guys. I put in the description. You can go to our special pricing page. Just $250 for unlimited brain maps for a year in any Peak Brain office in the US, or the same rough discount for 2 brain maps in our European and British partner offices. So you can come check out those sorts of things. Also, as you can see, I've left my book cover up on the screen. Not quite done, still finishing it up. But if you would like a copy, if you want to be notified when it drops, go to the link in the description or giftedandtortured.com and put your email in. And I'll send you an email blast out probably in about a week saying I've sent out the final copy for publishing, and I'm accepting pre-orders now. And I will do 100 author copies and sign them and send them out myself. And when those arrive, that's when I will drop it on Amazon about a week or so after it's available. Unless I can't do that on Amazon, I may have to do it all at once. We'll see. But either way, the signed copies are coming from direct orders, and any pre-order interest people will get notified the moment those are available. And I will give you a signed copy myself. Well, I'll get one handed to you. I'll physically sign something, and I will put it in the mail and send it off to you. Shipping is included in the US. I'll cover shipping if you buy a book. If it's overseas, we'll have to talk. Let me know if you want a bunch to give to your friend. Then I'll cover shipping. Anyways, hope you guys are doing really well tonight. Let's see, get some more questions. Demo Vicious is saying willpower is overrated in this case. Indeed. The clock is stronger than our will. Radar Ashwood, would you add a slow cortical potential module to the new software? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. SCP interests me, and Bierbaumer's work is well validated with regards to ADHD. It's SMR and ADHD is pretty strong, but so is SCP. And SCP intrigues me because it's a semi-voluntary form of neurofeedback, and very few are. I mean, HEG is. But SCP, to some extent, is a voluntary control form, and that's kind of interesting. I also think SCP is within the frequency tolerances of most amps. That is not true of the infra-low, infra-slow, that kind of stuff. Those need amps that get down to 0.00001 kind of thing. But I think SCP works fine down to like 0.01 essentially. And I don't know what the neurobit goes down to. I assume it's pretty good. The WizAmp spec, BioExplorer is limited to 0.3 in the filtering libraries. You can't get below that. You can't do DC coupled in BioExplorer. You can do DC coupled in the WizAmp with silver chloride electrodes and the right software. And you have to use something like BioEra or Signet. The original versions of Signet were built on top of BioEra, not anymore. And then you can get down to point like, based on the amp, quite far. And that's based on the NeuroAmp itself. But I think that the WizAmps get down to, I'll have to look and probably test it, but I think it's 0.001, so not really enough for infra-low or infra-slow for most people. Maybe 0.01 for these amps. I'll have to double check. But slow cortical potential, maybe. I've already built in offline Loretta analysis. I've built in filtering and remontaging a full head EEG. I've built in recording a full head EEG. So my goal with this software is to deploy a bit of desktop software to all you guys where you can do some neurofeedback and it records the sessions back on your fitness tracker in the cloud, as well as being able to record a full head EEG with a compatible amp, save that EDF file, scrub it, clean it, remontage it, do a little bit of quick analysis, not with Z-score norms, just with FFTs and some Loretta, and then save that EDF for QEEG analysis in your fitness tracker, and then I can take that in your fitness tracker, run the QEEG analysis using commercial tools, upload the results that you then have access to from your fitness tracker as well as your training software. So those pieces are getting closer and closer. I would say that the fitness tracker software called Noggin is about 80%, maybe 90% done, depending how you count, depending on what I actually carve out and leave in. And the neurofeedback software, feature-wise, is also about 95% for how far I want to get it. But it's young. It's green. It's still growing. And I have a lot of signal processing cleanup and protocol development, to improve and verifying it does what I think it does. But so far, so good. And that software called Metis, M-E-T-I-S, at least its code name. I may change it before I release it. But that software right now at the sample level is doing processing on EEG in the 4 microsecond per sample range, not millisecond, microsecond. And it's doing a whole path from the sample coming off the amp all the way through to the point where it triggers reward in 17 microseconds. And so the amount of overhead that I've been able to reclaim by using really, really low-level languages to build the signal processing loops is crazy. I mean, I was operating before, and in many software packages we use, the lag is promised to be I think Eager might promise 4 milliseconds. I'm pretty sure they get way under that, but they promise 4, and then the jitter is a factor as well. So once you include the screen refreshes and the jitter, your effective rates for things like Eager and Brainmaster end up being something like probably 20-30 milliseconds total time, and then about 10 milliseconds of jitter allowable. And I believe Eager and Brainmaster are both better than that, but I think that's what the spec would sort of allow people to hit with good programming. And I'm going to be so much faster. I mean, right now the actual processing is insanely rapid. And I believe Eager, for instance, does a better job at neurofeedback than many of the other software packages because of its provenance and history, because of how it was built. For those of you who don't know, the original programmer of Eager, who still, I believe, works for the company, although maybe not in a full-time role, is named Howard Lightstone. He's a very, very sweet man, very funny, brilliant, kind, got a slight edge to him that I really, really enjoy. Howard built Eager originally, and he did it for neurocybernetics. It was called, had a different name back then. And then neurocybernetics ended up, or EEG Institute ended up being sold to a different company. And then the software Eager reverted back to Howard's control after that company ended up folding. And Howard and his son-in-law, Lars Valla, who owns the company Eager now, Howard rebuilt the software as the software Eager instead of the software neurocybernetics. When I first started using the original versions of Eager, it ran on DOS, and you had to use two computers. So for those of you who don't know what DOS is, boys and girls, DOS is what came before Windows. And we had to have two computers because they weren't powerful enough. One of them wasn't powerful enough to run the whole neurofeedback system. You had one computer running the signal processing and one running the games, and a parallel cable between them, connecting them in real time. And the amplifier ran into one computer, and the technician sat in front of it, and the game sat in front of a different person. And it was like $12,000 or $14,000 of equipment in like mid-90s money. So it was very expensive, very high tech for the time. But you know, nowadays we run that equivalent on our phones essentially. So it's pretty impressive. So anyways, yes, I'm going to add that. I can be talked into it, Radar. Let me get the software up and running more thoroughly, soup to nuts first. I'm not an expert in SCP, so I would have to get into it a little more deeply myself. But I'll have it out the door early, being feature complete with sort of traditional amplitude training software and EEG recording and pre-cleaning for QEEG submission, which I think are the things that are the biggest gaps. And it'll be Mac and PC as well from day one, which I think is, again, some of the biggest gaps in our field should be covered at that point. And I'll offer it on a probably a monthly and annual subscription and keep it cheaper than anything else out there. Radar's asking, Doc, you gonna go to my podcast to promote your book? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just hit me up, Radar. I would go on any podcast, my podcast. Yes, I actually have 4 or 5 already scheduled. And I should have been scheduling them ahead of time. I have too many projects. I didn't do a lot of promotion for this book before I'm launching it. But yes, I have 5 or 6 already scheduled. A bunch more people said yes. I'm going to hire a podcast assistant shortly to get that person to start helping me manage those things. And yes, I'm going to try to drop 1 or 2 podcasts a week. Ramping up over the next month and then continuing all year long. And, you know, I know I haven't reached this first book, so I probably shouldn't tell you guys this, but I have 2 more books planned for this year. I have one called Mindfulness for Dysregulated Brains, and then one is called The Action Cadence, which is about productivity and procrastination when you have an ADHD or atypical brain that's stressed out and burnt out. Which one of those would be more interesting for those of you who are still on the live stream right now, for those of you who get the vote here at the end? Would you like a Mindfulness for Dysregulated Brains, or a book that is about procrastination and productivity and how forward action, forward momentum works in taking control of our brain? Which one of those things is more attractive? Let me know. And if you're watching this later on, let me know. If you've made it to the end of the video, here we are, an hour in. So absolutely, let me know. Radar Ashwood is saying, Doc, if you have 150 kits outstanding and Eager costs $100 a month and you're spending $15,000 per month on neurofeedback software, I can see why you're excited to bring it in-house. Yeah, we don't spend quite that much. We have a slightly different relationship with Eager than most people do because we're so big. But we still spend large amounts of money on it. And I'm not necessarily going to replace Eager like that either. I think I want to be doing a lot of using them side by side for a while and make sure that everything works as expected. I mean, I would, expect to be transparent, expect to finish this software well enough to use in the next couple of months. But then I'm probably going to use it in-house for at least 6 months while I work on things like a 510K certificate and, other just usability and bug testing. I mean, this I think could be world-changing software. So I don't want to just like half-ass it and dump out some buggy piece of software that isn't maintained. I want to, build a software company and launch a product that ends up having good support, developers, etc. And part of that means that I need to develop software myself as close to where I want it to be before I, hire other developers to work on it. That's what I've discovered as I become a better neuro-focused developer, is that I keep getting deeper into every project before I hire someone to help me work on it. And the later I wait to do that, the more work I actually do it myself, the closer I get to what I want. So we have software that's mostly done, and I will stay working on it myself for about 2 more months. And then I will probably release it to a small group of people who want to beta test it, alpha test it, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Radar is saying he'll tell the guys at Neural Noodle to have you on. You know what? I think they'll have me on. I've been on before. I think they'll have me on just by asking. You can't promise anything? Okay. No, I think that Pete and Jay and those guys would be happy to have me on. When I popped up and chatted, they've like sent me the link to join the back end. So I'm not banished, just too busy to show up as often as I used to. So, but I'll tell Pete, I'll forward. Actually, I already did. I think I forwarded this to Pete already. I may have sent him a form email. We'll see if he responds to it to like invite me back on. But yeah, if you guys know podcasts you want to see me on, if there's health and wellness podcasts, biohacking podcasts, ADHD podcasts, autism podcasts, neurodivergence, health and wellness writ large, I would love to know, because I've been on like a couple hundred, like 300 podcasts already over the past like 10, 15 years. And I am going to go on some of the better ones again soon to promote the books in a sequence. But also some of the better ones, the ones that were really big splashes 10 years ago, either have moved on or they've evolved into different things or aren't happening anymore. So I really would love to know some of the better podcasts you guys think I should pitch to. And if you want to pitch on my behalf, I wouldn't be opposed to you hitting the website up of those podcasts that you like so much and telling them they should have me on and giving them my andrewhillphd.com website. You can do that if you want to see me on a podcast. That's actually a really good way of, when I pitch, it's heard and people go, okay, thank you. Maybe sometimes they're like, oh yeah, come on. That's great. That's actually a lot of what happens. But sometimes they're like, thank you. We'll let you know. But if it starts happening from other people, that'll happen a lot more. I'll get invited on. So go ahead and seed the podcast audience out there for me. Shill from you guys. Find the best podcasts and beg those hosts to have me on. You can do it on NeuroNeedle too if you want, but that's an easy one to get back on. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out. I think next week the book won't be released for physical buying, but I might have it in pre-release by then. It just depends on how thoroughly I get through the proofread after the physical copy shows up again. Otherwise, I will probably show you a little bit more of the software next week while answering questions. The software is already robust enough to do HEG, no problem. It works really well. It needs some debugging still, but it works. I have the HRV I just got from a supplier. These are my HRV devices that I'm going to support. The Kaitos. I'm pretty sure this is the same style device that HeartMath uses with the USB and the plug, and I believe the chip is very similar, if not the same. So the HeartMath dongle might work with my software. I'll test it at some point. And this is a Bluetooth variant of the same. And since this software is Mac first, Windows compiles with every version so far, but the Bluetooth should be pretty trivial to get working. And so that means that I'll have hopefully a suite of HEG, HRV, EEG neurofeedback, and all-in-one, easy to use suite, and EEG recording software for full head recording. And I was toying with the idea. I don't have a huge amount of use for this, but I saw somebody ask on Reddit today for EMG devices, and he asked a bunch of different places, biohackers, neurofeedback, etc. Oh, plug for our neurofeedback. It's a pretty active forum and community. go there and ask questions. People love to give their opinions, at least. But I'm hoping I can have a full suite. And somebody there asked for EMG devices, and I was like, there's not a lot out there that are standalone devices that aren't like either really expensive, medical devices, or plug into other high-end EEG systems, so therefore they're really expensive. Or you go the other direction, and they're just like sensors you have to kind of roll your own, almost hobbyist style. Get an Arduino or a Pi or build a little kit or something. And there's nothing really in between. So I'm going to try to find you can find USB ECG rigs, and you can use them for EMG basically. But those are about $1,000 for the ECG rigs. So any of you who are watching this who might be interested or needing EMG biofeedback, just let me know. I can build that. I just don't know if it's worth it, because I don't know if anyone wants to spend $1,000 on a bunch of wires to do EMG. I may be able to find a way to do it with EEG wires instead, if you already have an EEG amp. But I think I'm going to put the EMG development criteria on the back burner the same way I'm going to put SCP and other sub 1 hertz onto the back burner. Also, Z-score training is on the back burner for the software suite. I'm going to incorporate some sort of Z-score norms at some point, and then I'll support real-time 19-channel amps, the MITSAR, probably the Neurofield Q21, at least those two, maybe others. And then I'll incorporate some sort of QEEG database in the back end for doing Z-score training, and maybe even QEEG analysis in the same tool. I'm not sure how much I'll make this the same tool or not. I might. It really depends on how easily I end up creating the full stack of devices. So, Radar is saying, the software will come with some pre-made designs, right? One of the worst things is buying something like BioEra and having to figure out how to make designs from scratch. Yeah, Radar, did you see it last week? Let me know. You can watch last week's peek at it. But yes, I'm gonna have a 1-channel 3-band, a 2-channel 3 bands each, an alpha theta, a ratio training. There's like one other preset in there. And then as you modify them, they start multiplying and becoming storage sessions for you, essentially. But as it is right now, I've already got the software communicating with the fitness tracker back end. So essentially you can record your sleep, your stress, your mood, your attention, your drinking, whatever else, all your medical records on a HIPAA compliant back end, like fitness tracker for the brain. And then that will talk to your neurofeedback software so that your action plans for neurofeedback, your meditation practices that you're sort of assigning to yourself, whatever else, will all show up on your desktop on your Metis software as the action plan. So as your neurofeedback coach, for instance, or therapist changes the plan for you, that synchronizes down to your software, and then you can just jump in there and play it. So I am going to bundle the membership to that online software with a membership to the desktop training software. They're going to come together. Every training software package comes with one license by default for the online tracking software. And then if you're a clinician or a family and you want to add other groups, you can sort of upgrade the tracking software license, and that unlocks the ability to do multi-client stuff. And on the software side, the price doesn't change. It just becomes segmented, because right now, if you log into the software, you're just one person. But if you log in and authenticate against the tracking software, suddenly all the user directories are completely isolated and encrypted and HIPAA compliant. So it allows you to use it pretty lightweight without doing lots of work configuring, with a couple of basic protocols, or it allows you to log into the Noggin software in the back end, synchronize your full history, treatment plan, neurofeedback sessions, other things you're doing, your history, etc., live with the neurofeedback software, so that when you do a session, your tracking software knows, your coach knows, your therapist knows, your support team knows. And so that when changes are made, those are reflected nearly instantaneously for your next session, at least, in the training software. So that's my vision, is to make that round trip much more seamless, so clients don't have to enter stuff, and so coaches don't have to chase as much detail. We will see. And there's some pre-made games in there too, Radar. You can go back last week and look at the software to check out some of the games. Joe Barr, hey Joe. Do any protocols involve doing multiple biofeedbacks simultaneously, like HRV and HEG? You know, I've built a design in the software, a screen in the software that does simultaneous HRV and HEG, actually. Because I'm using the same reward triggers and paths right now for those two screens, I haven't figured out really how to do both without just making them like additive parameters. We have to meet all parameters like you would in a 2-channel contingent. I don't think that's the most elegant. I'm trying to figure out what it means to have HRV go up while the HEG signal is going up and vice versa. Because there's some rationale there for creating something like the crossover index in alpha theta. You know, if you're having a change moment where alpha amplitude is falling at the same moment as theta is climbing, you're experiencing crossover. And that's a dissociative opening or aha or juicy nonlinear moment, depending how it's operating for you. Very, very useful, the hypnagogic access moment. There's something there as well, as you are both bringing up the perfusion but improving the heart rate variability. So I want to find out what that metric looks like mathematically and code for that and use that as a reward parameter. And I haven't yet figured that out. I've gone through literature a couple of times. There's hints, but I haven't yet found a good paper looking at the combination of essentially heart rate variability and vasomotion stability. And it's because the vasomotion concept is kind of new, and even perfusion isn't fully understood. So we have to look back at concepts in the literature like spreading cortical depression and default mode network activation, and then kind of infer from the vagal tone that hits the cingulates what's going on. But there's something there, and I can at least create an experimental metric that shows when those things are moving in a dissociation, a double dissociation, meaning you've got HEG going up and you've got HRV going down and vice versa. So I have a hunch that HRV improving, the number going up, and HEG's temperature going up together is not going to be as useful as the ability to bring HRV up and keep it stable while continuing to bring up HEG. I think that's going to be where the secret sauce lies, that the relative contribution of the perfusion dynamic against the stability of the HRV not having to stress or activate the sympathetic system to drive up the vasomotion is going to be where the regulatory fine-grained control will be best asserted or best trained. But I don't know. That's just a theory. So I'll build those things in a bit more. I haven't tested the HRV yet. The devices are still in boxes. But I built it all out. The drivers are all theoretically running. I'll try it all. I'll test it all. If you happen to have a Cognionics Camp device, if you have a Wiz or a Neurobit, if you have HRV, I'm looking for a very, very small group of people, maybe 3 people total, who are geeks in this space, who want to keep an eye on a repository of releases and maybe grab the rolling releases as they start coming out. I'll probably in about a month or 2 be ready for a very small super alpha testing group who's super excited to like grab whatever's, been iterated on, that's kind of breaky, grab it, test it, give some first person user feedback, and then let me know. So I'm probably going to literally grab like 3 people that are deep geeks in the neurofeedback space, because you guys are the ones that want this stuff and always participate. And I'll provide alpha software for you for a couple people. But otherwise, for the rest of you, you can buy it when it comes out, and it will be much less expensive than anything out there. I haven't fixed the price point yet. Again, I'm Mr. Transparent with this stuff, so I'm thinking of doing like $500 a year or $50 a month. If I do end up building out full quantitative EEG analysis and other, deep, rich tools, it could be a little more expensive, not a lot more. And I do not want to have $1,000 software. I do not want to have, software that locks you in. I want to have software where you can pay for it when it's useful, or you can buy it once and it's good for a year and it's, relatively affordable. My goals are to take a whole kit, including a device like this, the software you buy for training, even an amplifier you buy for doing brain mapping, and HEG and HRV, everything, and to get the full software and hardware kit that someone would need to under a $2,000 purchase price. And a lot of that is a device like this. And a big chunk of it is also the HEG sensor, one of these things. So I'll show you this as well. For those of you who aren't familiar with what HEG is, it's an infrared sensor. This particular one has two sensors, two germanium lenses, and you simply wear it. This style of HEG you never wear anyplace else but the middle. So you just wear it above a finger right there. And now it picks up all of the sort of perfusion dynamics as they oscillate. They don't exactly oscillate with stability, but they have this sort of washing and waving phenomena that comes up. And it's picked up by this. This is a relatively simple piece of hardware. There's also the NIR HEG, the blue headbands, which are still supported by, I think, Biocomp Institute in Los Angeles. Jonathan Tumim, son of the late, great Herschel Tumim. Those devices emit and receive red light, and they're very similar to the FNIRS devices like the Mendy. I believe that I can use the FNIRS style devices, the NIR HEG and the Mendy, to do HRV biofeedback as well, because we can get the pulse. I also think that I can use a webcam to do HRV biofeedback. So some of my future ideas are to build in a sensitive red or pink detection algorithm so you can pull the heartbeat out of the webcam, and when you don't have a $20 sensor, all you've done is download the software and played with it, you can use your webcam for the HRV perhaps. But I want to get a very affordable, I mean, if this device works, and I think it will, it's like wholesale $20, you know, retail double that. I think who is it? The EEG Sales, not EEG Sales, the one of the big EEG vendors in the US that resells lots of products and things has this device, I think for $45 or something, retail. That's a lot less than a $400 software and hardware clip package from HeartMath, right? So there's definitely some room to play there in the space. But these are all future features, so let me know if you would like that. And Joe, asking for HRV and HEG together, I appreciate that. That question means you will get it sooner or later. I'm assuming that meant you want it and don't want me to avoid it, right? So yeah, you'll get that. But like, this is the time. If there's things you guys wish that neurofeedback software could do, if you're doing something already with neurofeedback software that frustrates you, if you want to do something different, if you wished it did something, let me know. No guarantee I will incorporate it. I've worked for a couple of software development companies before between working in different levels of human service. And my first software company boss would tell me the customer only wants two things. The software customer, they want the trivial and the impossible. So if you ask for something, I'm like, oh yeah, that's easy, and it makes sense, you'll probably get it. But if you're like, I want it to levitate and record my brain with no electrodes, you won't get that. Or if you want things that aren't, you know, in scope, like right now I wouldn't do Z-score training because I don't have a Z-score database built in. There's a few things that take a lot of development that I'm not going to get out the door in the 1.0. But let me know, and I'll, you know, take a good listen to your questions and your thoughts around this stuff, and we'll see what we can build for you as a community. All right, guys, until next time, you take good care of those brains. I will see you soon. Do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel if not already subscribed, share the video with a friend, share the channel with a friend, tell your friend about the book. If you want to see the other books that Peak Brain Press is releasing this year, go to peakbrainpress.com. And you can sign up for any of the books. There's actually 4 books that are being released this year. I'm writing 2 of them. The other 2 are being co-written by Madeline McCann and I are writing a guide about how to do, you know, what neurofeedback is. And Jonathan Lamelli and I, who's our senior second person in the coaching side of things here at Peak Brain, John and I are writing a book on recording EEGs, artifacting EEGs, and interpreting QEEGs for both the coach or technician and the individual who's trying to understand their own brain, called the QEEG Field Guide. So that's the roster of books Peak Brain Press is releasing this year. If you want to sign up for any of them, go to peakbrainpress.com. But Gifted and Tortured coming out real soon, and so let me know if you would like to be notified, and I will add you to the email list. All right, guys, have a lovely evening. Take care. I will talk to you soon. See ya.